Good morning, everybody. This is a live emergency severe weather briefing as we have a moderate risk once again by the Storm Prediction Center. Looks like a QLCS tornado outbreak. And don't get too hung up on whether it's a QLCS event or a traditional supercell type of an outbreak, because wind shear is going to be so immense that these tornadoes are going to be capable of significant impacts, potentially substantial destruction, strong, maybe even violent tornadoes embedded within that line. And there still is a threat of some renegade supercells. I definitely favor the southern edge of the moderate risk, even down near the I-10 corridor, for isolated supercell storms even to develop. That'll be south of the pivot point within the upper level trough, and that's where I think there is going to be more westerly winds. We are going to focus on the shape of the trough ejection. It is quite a complicated shape. Comes in as a nice open wave with a ski jump pointing right into the southern plains. Normally, that would be a tornado outbreak situation this afternoon and evening across the southern plains if it were happening during April or May. Looks like the threat of supercell initiation near the triple point, however, is increasing this evening across southeastern Nebraska near the Kansas-Nebraska border in the path of the surface low track between about 6 and 9 p.m. We're going to break that down as well. Here is the latest 3-kilometer NAM, and I believe that the HRRR has had a really bad handle on the moisture, over-mixing the arrival of that new moisture just like it always does across the high plains. That's why I've always been kind of a NAM model fan for this evening setup across the triple point. The triple point's going to set up right up into the surface low. And it's called a triple point because it's a merger of 3 different frontal boundaries: a cold front, a dry line, and a warm front that extends off to the east. And usually wind shear is maximized right along the surface low track, right near the warm frontal boundary where the surface winds are more of an easterly direction, the nose of the surface base instability, a low-level jet as well, poking right up into that surface low. And then look at the storms that develop after sunset across central and eastern Kansas. Those are going to head up toward Kansas City late night tonight. And I was just talking to my storm chasing friend, David Baxter, about that one. And wouldn't be surprised to see a QLCS or even a supercell tornado in the Kansas City area late night tonight. We're definitely going to break that down as well. And here is the QLCS type of an event. Notice how it's a solid squall line. Not a ton of renegades being modeled out ahead of that line. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if there are renegades that are up nice and tight to that squall line that'll be capable of even producing strong to violent tornadoes. But the shape of the trough, I think, is crucial toward figuring out what you're going to target during the day. tomorrow, and I'm going to explain to you just a little bit of my reasoning for the target. Notice how this upper level trough develops a bit of an elbow or a pivot point that moves in through the lower Mississippi River Valley as the vortex lifts up to the north across Iowa, with another kicker system dropping south behind it. It's almost like a multiple vortex tornado within the parent vortex. It is the large-scale trough. Sub-vortices within it are the little short waves or vorticity maxima that are spinning around. Definitely that kicker system that drops in behind it kind of pushes that vort up toward Iowa, and that leads to a little bit of a pivot point within the upper level trough. And I want to target just to the south of that pivot point. That's because there are more westerly winds aloft. We were breaking it down on my live update last night for Facebook subscribers exclusively, and the shape of the upper trough is big. This is Tuesday morning. Earlier this morning shows a dominant vortex dropping down through Southern California. Nice jet max rounding the base of the trough. Not a ton of flow in the backside, so normally this trough would be done with its deepening, but you also have this short wave over the Canadian prairies, and these two systems will basically phase. Kind of a long distance teleconnective phase. Look at that vortex diving into the northern high plains. And notice this vortex that really consolidates this evening. This is at 7 p.m. this evening. This vortex starts to consolidate along the leading edge of the jet streak. So this is a ski jump shaped jet streak, we call it. Normally you want to target the nose of the ski jump, the exit region of the jet, the triple point, convergence of those boundaries, the warm frontal zone, more southeasterlies along the surface low track. But ahead of this vortex that's ramping up across central Nebraska, that has me concerned. A nice ribbon of a jet streak as well at the same time. Surface low also moving into this area. Left exit region of that jet certainly could provide just enough lift to get supercell storms near the triple point, Kansas-Nebraska border, southeastern Nebraska. I'm throwing out the HRRR model just because it has overmixed the dew points, as it always does. It definitely seems like that scenario is not fixed. So that system over the Canadian prairies is now diving south into the high plains. The vortex that intensifying over central Nebraska this evening lifts up through the eastern Dakotas, even further west than was modeled last night. Almost like two sub-vortices within the main vortex that is the larger scale trough or wave. And because of the interplay between these two vorticity maxima, a very complex interplay, it results in the formation of this elbow within the parent trough shape, basically a little bit of a pivot point. The south of that elbow, you have more westerly mid and upper tropospheric flow. To the north of that elbow, you get more northerly meridional flow as well. And that elbow is absolutely crucial. It looks like it's trying to form right about there. Late night tonight. There's the elbow or the pivot point right into northeastern Texas at this time of the trough. And notice how to the north of that line that I'm drawing with the cursor, you have more meridional mid and upper level flow, more south-southwesterly flow, a lot more southerly to the north of the elbow. To the south of that elbow, you get a lot more westerly component flow to the mid and upper tropospheric winds. That's going to be key to basically play near into the south of that elbow to have a maximum risk of supercell storms. And you can see that elbow is trending even further south near the I-20 corridor is where that elbow is located. So I think near into the south of the I-20 corridor, you're going to get more of that flow, which is a bit more westerly. The I-10 corridor down near the I-20 corridor, more westerly flow. I-21Z, that thing's just going to be raging. See here at 500 how you have almost a west-southwesterly wind, or at least due southwesterly across southern Mississippi, moving into southern Alabama. Probably going to get a tornado threat Wednesday evening as well across the Florida Panhandle and coastal Alabama, southern Mississippi. To the north of that, you have a lot more meridional flow, more due southerly mid-level winds, roughly parallel to the low-level jet as well, central northern Mississippi. But you're still going to have tornadoes embedded within the line down there. So I do think that the HRRR model does a lot better across the Mid-South when there is a much less likelihood of overmixing of the dew points, of course. This is at 0Z. Look at that ripping low-level jet down across coastal Mississippi, Biloxi, Gulfport, all the way up toward Meridian. That's going to be a very dangerous low-level shear environment. And I also think that there's the greatest likelihood of renegade supercells. Let's go back to about 18Z on the HRRR. Low-level jet. See this low-level jet just ripping. And you do have a bit more due southwesterly winds down as well across central and southern Mississippi, south of the pivot point. High blocking high downstream off the southeastern U.S. So south of the pivot point and basically south of I-20, you have a much more supercellular mode embedded within the squall line. To the north of the pivot point, I-20 off to the north, you have a classic QLCS case. This is by midday, about noon, Central Daylight Time, more of a QLCS regime approaching the Mississippi River. But I'm really interested in this southern mode. At least the 0Z HRRR last night was showing more of a supercellular mode within these approaching the Mississippi River. Eastern Louisiana could even get some renegades tucked up tight to that line. But the instability is also hugging the Gulf Coast region where you get more westerly flow, more directional shear as well. So I do think that that's where the greatest potential of supercell storms is going to be. And look at that, even by 20Z. The greatest co-location of surface-based instability and low-level wind shear, basically south of I-20, Vicksburg, down to the Gulf Coast, through the bayous of Louisiana. And also notice this instability building along the central Gulf Coast by 3 to 4 p.m. That only continues to ramp up. But boy, notice how the instability is really pinched down near the central Gulf Coast region. A lot less instability further north. Definitely going to be a classic QLCS with embedded tornado cyclones within it, within the squall line further north. But basically Jackson down through the New Orleans area. I know New Orleans just recently had that destructive EF3 tornado on the east side of the metro. It does look like there is a threat of potentially damaging severe weather once again moving into the New Orleans area about 5 or 6 p.m. tomorrow evening. And notice this instability starting to move on shore across the coastline, coastal Mississippi. That's setting the stage for a pretty dangerous environment over the southeastern corner of Mississippi. A very large, elongated hodograph, quite a bit of surface-based instability as well. It's building across that zone. And make sure you etch this hodograph into your head. It's not oriented incredibly well, but you're definitely going to have kind of a south-southwest to north-northeast storm motion. You'd really like your upper-level winds to be more in this region to kind of peel that storm motion back further right to squeeze out even more helicity. But still, there is just enough directional shear going from a due southerly low-level jet to almost due westerly upper tropospheric winds. Back over in this region, well above 6 kilometers. So your mid-level flow is quite backed, but then as you go up toward 300 millibars, you could see a sharp change in wind direction, more toward a west-southwesterly wind aloft. But unusually shaped hodographs. Instability goes all the way up to the I-20 corridor, very close to Meridian, Utah, Tuscaloosa areas by 0Z. Instability definitely lifts north through Alabama. This is by about 9-10 p.m. in the evening. And these could be supercell storms that are punching into the instability. You have a very strong low-level jet, 60 to 70 knots out ahead of those storms. Slightly more westerly, mid and upper tropospheric winds. So it is possible that these could be more embedded supercells. You don't want to get too hung up on the categories. As humans, we like to categorize things that really exist in more of a continuum. From isolated supercell storms to a band of supercell storms to a squall line with embedded supercells to a line with embedded mesovortices, a purely QLCS type of an event. It's a very fine line between all of those different categories, and you can even see some of these renegades that try to develop just ahead of the squall line as well. But definitely a dangerous squall line capable of destructive tornadoes, damaging straight line winds that is forecast to march across the Mid-South into Alabama, and that southern end really stays invigorated. Southern Alabama moving into the Florida Panhandle. This is getting closer to the midnight hour, Central and Eastern time. You got probably tornado-warned storms, potentially destructive tornado-warned storms moving from Mobile into the Florida Panhandle by midnight. So look at these intense storms moving into the Florida Panhandle late night, Wednesday night. That's going to be around the midnight hour. And I think that's what I'm chasing. And I want to show you the issues with the HRRR really quick as well, with the moisture return and the overmixing that happens. Actually, the HRRR east of a dry line. Here is your cold front surging down to the south. So the HRRR has the triple point way up north into east central Nebraska. And basically a dry line extending down to the south of it, cold front, and also a warm front. That's why it's called a triple point. But because the HRRR has been overmixing the dew points during this, it botches up all the surface features. Has a rapidly ejecting surface low, really has your moisture pooling up against the warm front up near Omaha and to the west of Omaha. The 3-kilometer NAM is a little bit further south with a trough ejection. Doesn't mix out the dew points as much, doesn't rapidly advance the dry line into eastern Kansas. And you can see how these dew points are in the low 50s, even the 40s up, tucked up against the triple point with some 50s dew points pooling along the warm front. Watch the difference between here, the HRRR, and the 3-kilometer NAM. A ton more moisture. And the 3-kilometer NAM is much better with moisture across the high plains, new arriving moisture as well across the Great Plains. And it does look like there's going to be at least mid-50s dew points all the way up to the triple point. The triple point is just a couple of counties up, almost to the I-80 corridor, York area by 23Z. And it is an environment that is supportive of tornadoes as well up at that triple point. Definitely a strong low-level jet, 50 knots just off to the east of it, 40 knots as well in the more well-mixed environment. Definitely have some low-level cape punching into that triple point as well. Look at that cape. And it's probably going to be storms as well, just on the north side of the surface low, probably pumping out little tornadoes. And this dry line is going to initiate storms in east central Kansas after sunset. And that could be the mode that could head up toward Kansas City late evening. Definitely could even bring a tornado threat up toward the Kansas City area. But there's your triple point. Notice how the shear or the surface base instability wraps up right up tight to the surface low. You can look at the 0 to 1 kilometer EHI. And just on the northeastern quadrant of the surface low, it's maximized, and you can definitely see some holes within that warm sector over southeastern Nebraska, showing supercells that are trying to initiate within that environment. Quite a favorable hodograph as well. A massive wind shear and an east-southeasterly wind. It looks like this might be near or just north of the warm front because it does have a pretty stout capping inversion. Probably not going to get surface-based parcels with such a stout capping inversion as that. Easterly winds right at the surface, but that's also right along the warm front, maybe even just north of the warm front. And just south of that warm frontal zone, you likely will erode that cap, and we'll get the development of surface-based storms. But immense directional shear. Easterly surface wind, southwesterly wind a kilometer above the ground, and then a 500 millibar jet max west-southwesterly. The left exit of which should be enough to create enough lift to initiate storms within that zone. Even a PDS TOR sounding. I imagine that the Storm Prediction Center is going to increase the probabilities up near the triple point later on today. Very steep low-level lapse rates by the 3-kilometer NAM, breaking the cap as well, the capping inversion a little bit further south of the warm front where you have more southeasterly surface winds. A lot of easterly flow as well in this upper left quadrant of the storm system. So a very favorable hodograph. That's 340 0 to 1 kilometer SRH and a critical angle that's near 75 degrees. So you're going to have almost purely streamwise vorticity intake in the lowest kilometer by any storms that are moving southwest to northeast at about 40 knots. And that environment does get even more favorable as the low-level jet increases across southeastern Nebraska. And right at 0Z, look at the initiation of supercell storms down near the Wichita area off the dry line. These are the storms that are going to have to produce over southeastern Nebraska, or this band of supercells hugging the surface low at 23Z. But it's possible that this could be the mode of supercells that initiate over southeastern Nebraska. They don't look incredibly healthy on the 3-kilometer NAM, but it's just a convective allowing model. Really, we're just looking for the likelihood of initiation of storms. And right at about 5 p.m., look at that, some bubblers over southeastern Nebraska, south of the I-80 corridor, right near the northern edge of the southern tier of counties across southeastern Nebraska. That is where that storm initiates. And you can see the pooling right along the warm front. That happens a lot with these setups where you get just some greater dew points right along the immediate boundary. Definitely reminds me of a tornado setup in 2006 near the Beatrice, Nebraska area. Late arrival of moisture, and there was a storm that produced quite a substantial tornado down over the southeastern corner of Nebraska. So I would not be surprised if at the 11:30 outlook we do see an uptick in the tornado probabilities, maybe closer to 5%. Look at the dry line here. Strong dry lines we're going to see all year with this year 2 La Nina, warm NPO across the north central Pacific, cold PDO. You're just going to get really strong dry lines that march off to the east. Wildfire danger throughout the Texas Panhandle. You can look at the 10-meter wind gusts behind the dry line. These are going to be ripping, gusting up to 50 miles an hour into central Kansas. So the wildfire threat is going to be substantial. Texas Panhandle, even southeastern New Mexico, through the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles, up into southwestern Kansas, even into central Kansas. Big wind gusts, very low relative humidity, extreme fire danger anticipated within this zone behind the dry line today. Red flag fire alerts all over the place across this environment. And watch these supercells, central and eastern Kansas, down even into northern Oklahoma. These are going to have tornado potential. That's where the current 5% zone is by the Storm Prediction Center. That's at 8 o'clock this evening. So these actually develop right near and just before sunset now. And that's within a pretty substantial low-level jet. 35, 40 knots out of the southwest. So watch those supercell storms that evolve across eastern Kansas today. I'm concerned about these. And these are going to be headed toward the Kansas City area by about 10 p.m. Everything lines out along the cold front across southeastern Nebraska by the time those arrive at Omaha. And then you're going to get these renegades back toward Wichita, up toward the Kansas City area. 10, 11 p.m., up toward midnight even. Could have some tornado producers knocking on the back door of Kansas City. Moving into the Flint Hills of Kansas as well. Another mode further south, southwestern Oklahoma into central Oklahoma by about 4Z. So that's about 10 p.m. 11 p.m. Convective line just to the east of the metro. And some convective blobs from eastern Kansas up through the Kansas City area. So I'm thinking we're going to get an initiation of storms. You can kind of see a little bit of cloud cover and showers that develop in association with the left exit region of the jet. See this jet poking up near the triple point? That cloud cover is because of the lift that happens on the left exit region of the jet. You also get lift on the right entrance region of the jet. Vortmax intensifying over Nebraska, lifting off to the north with a kicker system dropping down behind it. So I think that the left exit region should be enough to fire off a storm. And notice how at the upper levels, the HRRR and the 3-kilometer NAM are almost exactly the same with the positioning of the jet streak. They are vast differences, though, in the amount of mixing that's going on out here. Just runaway, absolute runaway mixing happening over southeastern Nebraska and northeastern Kansas. Don't really think that's going to happen. But it could. We'll just have to see how it plays out, and then we can develop our new forecast model biases and patterns for the new season. The HRRR a lot of times is right for the wrong reasons, kind of being tweaked based on the convective evolution to get convective initiation accurate. It does by about 8 p.m. have these supercells across northeastern Kansas just to the west of the Kansas City metro. These could have tornado potential as well that move into northwestern Missouri, down through eastern Kansas, 3-kilometer NAM also has the mode coming out of northwest Texas, southwest Oklahoma, towards central Oklahoma. So, wow. Got to get the ticker back up. Absolutely need to get the ticker back up, everybody. I wonder if we're going to be going to an enhanced risk, maybe. On the new outlook. I did notice the Storm Prediction Center definitely loves the HRRR model quite a bit. So that's why you have this 2% tornado probability up near the triple point. But I think now that we're starting to look at surface maps, starting to see that moisture advection is happening quite rapidly, maybe the HRRR is overmixing the new arrival of dew points as it does across the high plains as well. 3-kilometer NAM is holding serve. Definitely showing those mid to upper 50s dew points wrapping up into the triple point. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a 5% risk added in the new outlook that includes the southeastern Nebraska area of the triple point and also northeastern Kansas toward Kansas City, maybe even back toward Wichita for that nocturnal mode that develops further north. That the convective allowing models are definitely hinting at discrete supercell storms and a little bit more of a messy mode in the heart of the 5% area further south. And I'm going to be heading out today, just after this briefing. My plan is to roll out and for targeting of the moderate risk, of course. So you can see that the wrap has the surface low right now over western Kansas. And let's see what it does with the surface low. Zoom out a little. It does ramp up the surface low over the 6-hour period here. 2 hours, tightens it. That's sub 988 millibars there. It is moving pretty rapidly. And that's by 22Z. So let's see what it does with the thermodynamics. See if it mixes out dew points quite a bit. It is a little bit further north. The blue is convective inhibition. So that's negative CAPE. And you can see that through eastern Kansas. That's definitely going to preclude the development of daytime storms likely until you get really close to sunset across eastern Kansas. But notice how to the north of the surface low, which well to the north of Hastings, even northwest of Lincoln, you do have some surface-based instability that develops right up against the surface low. That's at 22Z, 5 p.m. Central Daylight Time. So I do expect supercells to initiate in that environment, but it looks like the wrap is kind of an average between all the different models and the positioning of the surface low. And it does mix similarly to the HRRR too. So maybe the HRRR is not over mixing and it's just in tune with the abundance of dry air just above the surface that you'd often see with a year 2 La Nina event. And just to hammer it home again, the sea surface temperature anomalies. You can see La Nina continues to rage this spring across the tropical Pacific. Some warm anomalies, though, are starting to invade across the eastern tropical Pacific. That could be the first signs of an El Nino pattern that's starting to emerge across the eastern tropical Pacific. Maybe it'll start to erode these negative anomalies. Some of the models are showing a triple dip and even a resurgence of La Nina conditions toward the end of the summer. But then you get the negative PDO horseshoe, cold anomalies, or at least relative to average, that will propagate around the eastern periphery of the ocean basin all the way up through the Gulf of Alaska. And then you get the warm blob that is the North Pacific Oscillation, or the NPO. That's important to helping to force a ridge centered over the Pacific to the west of North America and helps to encourage the rapid deepening of troughs over western North America in a negative P&A pattern. That's why this active spring is happening. And looking at the long-range forecast, it looks like it's going to continue through at least middle April. And you still have a warm Gulf of Mexico as well. Looking at the fire danger, extreme fire danger, a hatch area across the northern Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma Panhandle, into southwestern Kansas. That's behind the dry line. We were breaking down that environment. Low relative humidity, strong wind gust up near 50 miles an hour out there driving wildfire. Very impactful, potentially deadly wildfire conditions out there. Stay tuned to local authorities in case mandatory evacuation orders are issued. And that extreme fire danger includes the Amarillo area down into the Texas Panhandle. So it's basically equivalent to a high risk. Elevated critical extreme hatch area for potentially destructive wildfire danger dominating the Oklahoma Panhandle, northern Texas Panhandle, into southwestern Kansas. So while we're talking about mixing out of the dew points of the new arriving moisture axis, at that time, very gusty winds are going to be translated down to the surface behind the dry line with those near dry adiabatic lapse rates, bringing those gusty winds all the way down to the surface. Extremely critical risk. That includes Liberal, Dodge, all the way up to Garden City, down to Amarillo, and critical fire danger all the way up, even to the Triple Point, all the way up to the Nebraska-Kansas border. Gotta hammer home the danger with the wildfire risk across the northern Texas Panhandle into southwestern Kansas, and that's going to be something that we're going to see through the entire spring, especially with these very strong troughs that will just continue to eject across that area. Let's take a look at some observed soundings, 12Z soundings. I want to look at Dallas to take a look at the moisture depth. Here's Dallas, and it is quite shallow moisture. We got about a 59 dew point this morning at 12Z. Moisture goes up to just above 900 millibars, but that's pretty shallow moisture. And look at this dry air just above the surface on that sounding, where the green line, where you have greater separation from the red line, that's greater temperature dew point spreads, and that's why you get such crazy mixing being indicated by the HRRR and also the RAP model. The fact that the RAP model is also on board tells me that maybe the HRRR is not totally out to lunch with that crazy mixing. 50-knot low-level jet just above the ground trying to transport that moisture. You're going to get some mixing down of moisture, some pooling along the warm front across southeastern Nebraska, but a lot of dry air just above the surface. Stout capping inversion as well. Down near the Gulf Coast even, some relatively shallow moisture, despite it being into the 70s now. And still, even down along the Gulf Coast, you have that dry pocket of air just above the surface. It's prominent all the way down, even into the western Gulf. And you're going to see this type of a profile a lot this season. Dry air just above, deep moisture, new arriving moisture, a lot of dry air, strong dry lines as well. Strong elevated mix layers. This is the new HRRR at 15Z. Really want to focus in on the dew points, and it looks like it's reducing the mixing a little bit now. You still have some low 50s dew points up into the triple point. But boy, it looks like pretty strong agreement in the low-level moisture profile between the HRRR and the RAP model. The RAP model is trending a little bit north of the surface low track as well. Cold front marching southward. Dry line as well, marching way to the east. The abundance of dry air back behind this dry line is causing the dry line to be more aggressive in its advance, causing a rapid ejection of the surface low further north into east central Nebraska. So you might need to target right off this elbow, northwest of Lincoln a ways. That's where the best chance of an initiation of a supercell storm is, by about 6 p.m. That environment, east central Nebraska. And then this southern mode develops off of a very strong dry line, east central Kansas. I think that the dew points might even be a little bit higher than that. To the east of that, probably going to see low 60s dew points by this time by 0Z. And I think these supercell storms, 7, 8 p.m., are going to be moving through east central Kansas this evening. So those are my thoughts on the triple point initiation up into southeastern Nebraska. I do think there's going to be some supercells that develop up there, maybe an isolated tornado or two. And then I think some of those renegades will develop east central Kansas, moving toward Kansas City. But during this briefing, I've kind of warmed up a little bit to the HRRR mixing out of those 2 points because of the RAP support. The RAP model seems to be supporting the little slightly further north ejection of the surface low. And even the 12Z 3 kilometer NAM has the further north track of the surface low with that elbow. Dew points, though, about 4 to 5 degrees higher across this zone. But looking at the forecast soundings down through Dallas all the way down to the Gulf Coast, there definitely is that dry pocket of air just above these newly arriving dew points. And so there definitely is some meteorological support for that rapid mixing that's being indicated by the RAP model. And the HRRR. But notice how you have mixing out of these dew points as well by the RAP. This is the RAP model down into the low 50s, triple point further north. So this tells me that the RAP model and the HRRR are in quite substantial agreement with the further north track of the surface low, some wraparound of mid 50s dew points to the west of Omaha, and really just kind of mixing, dominating the scene across Kansas. Wildfire threat, though, ripping in this slot of a dry line out ahead of the cold front. Then when the cold front arrives, winds will shift out of the north. That'll cause any ongoing wildfires to change rapidly in their direction. But this is a dangerous zone for wildfires. Even up through after sunset, the gusty winds continue. 987 surface low up across eastern Nebraska. And I think I'm going to be targeting the QLCS threat southern end down I-20, between the I-20 and I-10 corridors, maybe down toward I-10 Wednesday late morning through the afternoon, chasing aggressively that QLCS with embedded tornado cyclones within it. Figure we could wait another 5 minutes until the new outlook comes out. And meanwhile, we can look at the hodograph product here on Pivotal Weather, which is pretty awesome. It's good to see this new focus on the hodograph that millennials are bringing in. My office mates were really obsessed with hodographs and invented the critical angle back in the day when I was in grad school. And now all these model products, Cameron Nixon definitely coined this technique of plotting hodographs at every grid point out here on the models. And it's awesome to see. And at 6 p.m., even on the RAP model, look at that hodograph right over Omaha. And it's also right in the surface base instability as well. Let me zoom in a little bit on that hodograph. Right in that arc of surface base instability and greater wind shear. And you want to look for the looped hodographs to have sufficient low-level wind shear for tornadoes. Notice how the grid points on the RAP, you're not sampling anything within that environment. But this one right here in Omaha seems to be just east of the elbow. Probably even more favorable hodographs just to the north of it. Not surprising that you have these large looping hodographs over surface stability, more of a decoupled boundary layer out there. And as you go just after sunset at 8 p.m., the hodographs begin to expand, even across eastern Nebraska, down across eastern Kansas, even into central Oklahoma. But most of the instability is northwest Oklahoma through the Wichita area. Wouldn't be surprised to see a tornado down near Wichita as well this evening, between about 8 and 11 p.m. And these hodographs that are favorable for tornadoes, even across the Kansas City area, as instability, I think are going to need to be north of this pivot point in Kansas to get supercell storms. They'll probably initiate down near Wichita, 8 to 11 p.m., and then move northeast into northeastern Kansas. Definitely a Cape Max happening down near Wichita with very favorable hodographs at about 10 or 11 p.m. tonight. Those are some very favorable hodographs. And look at storm relative helicity. Look at that max and the storm relative shear nosing up into the Wichita area. So not surprising, the more looped photographs that you see over southwestern Kansas, that's where you get the greater 0 to 1 kilometer SRH as well. So I'm watching that zone, Wichita up through northeastern Kansas. Watch this area as a potential generator of supercell storms moving into this very favorable environment. Storm relative helicity is maxed a little bit there into southern Kansas. So according to the RAP, it definitely shows an environment ripe for tornadic supercells late evening Wichita, and then that environment starts to increase down through central Oklahoma as well. We're now looking at the RAP model. Probably see a PDS Tor sounding, definitely a Tor sounding. A little bit of low-level stable air tries to bleed in there, but a ton of cape above that. Very favorable photographs as well. Let me zoom out on this damn thing here. There you go. So surface wind relatively weak, shy of 10 knots. This is what we mean by decoupling the boundary layer too. You get the development of a little nocturnal inversion at the low level. See how the temperature decreases down into the mid 60s a little bit. That causes surface winds to weaken and back below it. And then you even get an increase in the low level jet just above the nocturnal inversion, almost like a inertial oscillation. The 1 kilometer wind southwest to northeast pushing 50 knots. Surface wind just shy of 10 knots. You get about 40 knots of shear between the surface and 1 kilometer, carving out quite a bit of low-level helicity within the storm motion vector and the hodograph curve. You're looking down at the atmosphere. Wind vectors and magnitude vector, the wind direction is plotted the way that the wind is blowing. Different than when you plot the way the wind is coming from on a surface map. That's how these wind barbs are. Southwest to northeast. Notice how the wind barbs, the flags are on the southwest side, the direction the wind is coming from. So a southerly wind, any easterly, southeasterly component wind is going to be in this quadrant. Any southwesterly wind is going to be in this quadrant, increasing speed with every ring that goes out. And your northerlies are going to be down in these quadrants, behind cold fronts usually. So you can see a little bit of some southeasterly surface winds below that nocturnal inversion, and then above it, southwest low-level jet increasing up to 50 knots. See that ring right there? 50-knot ring, 60, 70, all the way up. Three-kilometer NAM also kind of blows this environment up across northern Oklahoma into southern Kansas with a favorable shear environment for tornadoes with a storm within it in the Kansas City area as well. That's it. 12Z. Earlier, let's go to 2Z and see if it ramps up. So even the 3-kilometer NAM really tries to ramp up the shear environment northwestern Oklahoma into the Wichita area. Not as robust up into south central Kansas as the RAP is indicating. But watch out any mature supercells that are able to initiate along the northwestern periphery of that wind shear. South central Kansas through the Flint Hills all the way up into the Kansas City area. Maybe those storms as well coming out of southwestern Oklahoma into the central part of the state. Could be quite favorable as well. And let's see what the SPC went in there. Oh wait, I'm Eastern time. What the hell? The new one was issued 7 minutes ago. 16:20. So it does look like a slight risk is retained. And definitely siding with the RAP HRRR congregation here. And retained the 2% tornado probabilities, wrapped them around the north side of the surface low to include Norfolk, Lincoln. You're right on the elbow. And he did have a 5% tornado risk expanded from Wichita up to Kansas City for that mode that could develop down near Wichita this evening about 10 p.m., lifting up toward Kansas City. That's the new SPC outlook. We're looking at the new model guidance here in real time. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to hit the notifications button. Become a subscriber on Facebook as well for in-depth forecast model discussions. Going to do one this evening once I arrive in the target area down near Jackson for tomorrow's threat. Might even end up heading toward Alexandria during the middle of the morning. 5% tornado threat also includes that southern mode developing across northwest Texas, southwestern Oklahoma that could even move through the Oklahoma City area. But a slight risk has been retained. I think that's fine. I think a slight risk will cover this, but main surface low forecast to deepen southeasterly low-level winds transport a narrow corridor of 50s dew points. That'll be pooling along the warm front. CAM guidance in agreement, but the 3-kilometer NAM's a little bit slower, more favorable for surface-based supercell storms a couple of tiers up. Storms only briefly surface-based before they track north of the warm front. There's a chance of a brief tornado or two before the storms become elevated. Surface dry line, cooling aloft, initial storm, supercellular, all hazards possible, even by evening. Gradual evolution into a QLCS. So if I were chasing both days, I'd probably position El Dorado area, just northeast of Wichita. Get some good food, Taco Casa or something out there. Maybe flip some rocks, start looking for some milk snakes out there across the Flint Hills, waiting for that nocturnal mode to develop. And then I would chase it, maybe bank on potential daytime initiation of storms at about 8 p.m. near the Wichita area, and then follow those up the turnpike up to Kansas City. Talking to Sean Schofer about Dominator 3 coming down during peak season. There definitely are some logistics issues associated with that, but trying to work it out for a reunion of Team Dominator that launched the rocket into the tornado in Linwood, Kansas. Got to get that paper published. I'm done with it. It has 37 pages long, but shortening it down to about 15 pages is going to be key. But I'll show it to you in all its glory. Might even need to hire an editor or something to shorten it to 15 pages because I'm driving so much and I just don't have the attention span in my older age to really do anything except for these live morning briefings and storm chasing, of course. But thank you, everybody, for joining me for this live update. I think I'm going to be targeting the QLCS regime, and there still could be some renegade supercells that develop somewhere between I-20 and the I-10 corridor, southwestern Mississippi into southeastern Louisiana. I do think impactful severe weather could impact the New Orleans area again, and we had that recent destructive EF3 tornado the night of March 22nd recently. Crazy, I heard about that imposter, the National Weather Service damage surveyor that was wearing a National Weather Service shirt and was falsely claiming that the tornado was upgraded to an EF4. CNN ended up interviewing the guy, and they took down the tweet a little bit because they verified that it was an imposter. And the actual WCM from NWS Slidell came out and said, "That's an imposter. That's not me. It's an EF3 tornado." But I always see wild things that happen these days. It's like the Wild West out here for the internet, and that applies to the extreme weather community as well. There is a squall line that's going to be marching late morning, approaching the Mississippi River, and then I'll activate full-blown chase mode. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this live briefing. Very impactful severe weather ahead. Storm Prediction Center has retained the 2% tornado probabilities for the surface low track. RAP and HRRR seem to be on board with the overmixing scenario. There's a lot of dry air just above the surface, as is the nature of these Year 2 La Nina events. So I'm going to start headed southwest. I'm going to try to beat rush hour traffic in Atlanta, and then I'm going to continue off to the southwest, probably ending up in the Jackson area late night tonight. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this live weather report. Never stop chasing.